my dress too. And he likes my dress too. And he likes my dress too. And he likes my dress too.
Dress sense makes sense. Could all be a throwback day or recent. Still works. Minimal makeup, that natural upload. My man look good when we hit road.
Said he like my face with no makeup on. Said he likes my face with no makeup on. And he likes my dress too. And he likes my dress too.
Dus ook dat soort, ook studenten.
And he likes my dress too.
If I talk like this? Yeah? Yeah, it's... Okay. Good evening, everybody. Great that you are here at this opening night of a month full of activities. My name is Leo van den Burg. I'm the section leader of the Urban Design section at the Urbanism department in Faculty of Architecture here in Delft. And I'm your moderator tonight. What we have for you, this evening marks the start of an extensive series of activities on or related to urban design in and outside of our faculty in the coming month, of which you see the program here behind me. A month of urban design, projections, limits, and counters originated from the section of urban design at Urbanism. Our section has a legacy of public programs, exhibitions, and publications, and with this month we want to continue this tradition by opening up new avenues for development in didactics, design methods, and design research. But we were not alone in this. We have worked together with many others inside this faculty and outside, who graciously teamed up with us with their respective activities and greatly enriched the program. Too many to name now, but I want to extend a special word of thanks to Janina José, Caroline Newton and Stefan Nijhuis, Hans de Boer and Marcel Hertog, and the Polis Study Association of the Department of Urbanism. But tonight we also celebrate the opening of the exhibition Urban Design BK, Scales, Subjects and Fabrics, which you can see here beside me. Urban Design BK is an exhibition about the core engagements with urban design in our faculty, how they have been evolving over the years and what they revealed about the dynamic state of the discipline. Projects from a multitude of groups in the faculty are shown here, with mostly graduation projects ranging from around 2005 until the present. And the main division of the title, Scales, Subjects and Fabrics, is also the framework of tonight's event, a panel discussion on the agency of urban design with 6 presently still 5, but soon 6, diverse panel members coming from academia, practice, and research. But before I introduce them, another word of thanks. This month and the accompanying exhibition would not have been possible without the help of the 3 curators, Tanea Kuznetsov-Bakin, Nikos Katsikis, and Victor Munoz-Sant. Thank you all very, very much. We thank our Dean. We thank our Dean Dick van Gameren and Javier Arpa and Luisa Martins of the BK Public Programs for their hospitality and assistance. And then about tonight, I will introduce the panel members to you. First of all, we have Tess Broekmans, partner at Urban Design in Amsterdam and professor of urban design here at TU Delft. Mike Emmerich, partner at Crimson Historians and Urbanists, director of the Independent School for the City in Rotterdam, and advisor on urbanization and mobility at the Dutch Board of Government Advisors. Raquel Hedrich Silva is a PhD candidate in our department in climate adaptation in the urban design section. She is an oceanographer by training, but with an interdisciplinary expertise in sociology and international development. Sophie de Kruijf, student at our faculty and board member of the Faculty Study Association Stilos, where she is Commissioner of Education and Orientation. Soon will join us Paul Vermeulen, who had a problem with the train, a delay with the train, but he is rushing to get here. Paul Vermeulen, architect and partner of the Smet Vermeulen Architecten in Ghent, and professor of urban architecture here at TU Delft. And finally, Caroline Newton, Van Eesteren Fellow at the Faculty of Architecture and section leader of the Spatial Planning and Strategy section at the Department of Urbanism. Now, the central question we have asked our panelists was on the agency of urban design. What can we hope to achieve through designing, design research, and design thinking in relation to matters of urbanization? In view of all the present societal challenges involving the division of space, what are the competences we should teach our students, the questions to put central in our research, and the alliances we need to forge with practice? We will take the division of the exhibition as a starting point: scales, subjects, and fabrics. What are the temporal and spatial scales we should be working on? Who is urban design for? Along the gradient from city to hinterland. And we have asked the panelists to select one image or video clip for each of these topics. And this is what they came up with. A selection of images that will guide our conversation, we hope. Tonight, we will not attempt to systematically go through all of these images. That would be a bit mechanical, we think. We will jump from one image to the next in an attempt to look for common ground, together with you, the audience. So please feel free to ask questions or to have your voice also heard. The aim is not to formulate quick answers, but to formulate more precise questions that can be used in the other activities during the Urban Design Month. Well, and with that introduction, I would like to start the discussion, and I would like to turn to Tess and ask you, what images did you bring for us?
Thanks. I selected 3 images, as you asked, and I found it quite difficult because they were quite abstract themes. So the first image was about scale. Am I right? Yeah?
Yeah.
And I wanted to focus a bit on time rather than scale in space. Mm-hmm. So the first image is it's quite an old image that my predecessor at the office, Gert Oerhaan, made, I think 30 years ago, which is about the pulse of change, he called it, how every part of the city has a different rhythm and a different way of changing. And I think that's something that inspires me still quite a lot, that some things are really permanent or really in a slow pace, like the structure of the public space. You have streets that are there for centuries. But the way we use that space or the way we design the public space has a much shorter pace. So this different ways of time in the way we design is for me a main inspiring point, because I think we are in such uncertain times. We have to really think about how to look in the future and how to we cannot. I think we never could see in the future, but at the moment it feels even more difficult than ever to predict what will happen and how to anticipate on that as designers.
Even though the waves do
continue and you can look
right?
back and you can look forward and then learn from that, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the second
The second image was about subject, and for me the subject is the user of the city. I mean, we are all users of the city, and I think that what we design for is for making active use, and of course not only for humans, but we tend to be quite, also in a school like here, looking from plans top down to designing, and I think we have a lot to learn from the everyday use of the city, and that people who use the city every day are maybe the most important people to learn from how to design a city.
Okay, great point. I'm sure we will come back to that later on. But maybe first so this was the second slide, right?
Yeah,
Informal
this
use
is in
of
Oostenburg, and I like this image because it's an old structure where they used to put big machines into boats, and now it's part of the public space and people make use of it. So it's like also taking your place in the public space. And the last one, fabrics, I felt like, okay, so I have to bring now an image of a street or a structure, and I was like, okay, let's not talk about physical fabric, but more about the social fabric. And we do a research at the moment in Oostenburg about how a community, how a neighborhood is created and how a community is created within a neighborhood. And these are some stills from small movies that we made on that topic.
Okay, so could you summarize what is for you as professor or as partner at Urhan, what do you consider to be the essential aspects of urban design?
Thanks. Well, yeah, why not?
Yes, I'm sure they're there. I'm sure they're there.
Yeah, so I think starting with what is already there and getting a good look at what you are. For me, designing is really about the city and not and about adding things to what is already there. So respecting what you find and making use of that and trying to read that properly, also the way it's used, I think is for me a fundamental starting point.
Okay.
And then that also inspires you to find what should be next or what could be added. Yeah. And I think, we are in a time of massive changes and a lot of transitions going on at the same time, so you have to get a bit of grip on how these transitions are taking place and how that will help you to look at the city as a living organism.
Yeah. Well, let's have a look at these at the mechanisms and the things that designers can do to get grips with that later on. But I want to move now to Raquel, because what you describe in your images are in a way topics of the European city. It's a Western tradition that you find yourself in. But Raquel, to clarify for the audience, we have asked the panelists also to prepare questions for each other. So Raquel came up with a question regarding this tradition. Raquel, can you clarify?
Yes, exactly. Is this working?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. So the question that I had for Tess was that exactly what you meant, that the kind of methods that are developed, for example, in this faculty are also based on experiences and experiments in European cities. And once we are kind of passing that on to our students that are possibly going to be working on southern cities and with a different context, with a different starting point, like you mentioned, that you first need to work what is already there. It's a completely different already there. And then how do you think that can be used in that context, or what is it that their design is going to be set out to do in that different context?
Thanks. Yeah, I think you already gave the answer a bit yourself. It's about the methods. So what we learn is we don't give the answers. We learn methods how to see what's going on, and how to understand what is happening rather. And I think for me it is relatively easy to understand that in the Western context, because I know the whole cultural context there. It's impossible, I think, for me to understand it in an Indian context, for example. So, but the good thing is that students who come here, they have that knowledge, they have the local knowledge. So it's more about teaching them methods to use their own knowledge from the context they are from, and I think they will be able to give the answers. I will not be able to give the answers to their questions, but we will learn the methods so they can give the answers themselves, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my question was also that if these methods are enough to see the complexity in the southern cities context, or if there's something else that needs to be added within the methods to kind of read spaces that are so different from each other.
Yeah,
well.
also there I think we should learn from the others to help us on that, because obviously the complexity is much larger than we see nowadays here, so there is a lot to learn, I think. And I think that's also the nice thing here, that it's maybe students learn more from each other even than from the teaching.
Yeah. I think, Raquel, your point is also that the methods that we use in educating our students, they are colored by the tradition that we are in, right?
Yeah.
It's these are not universal methods that we use, or at least I think that's the point you want to make, right?
Yes, exactly. I think that it relates a bit about ways of knowing and how, exactly, knowledge is not universal and it's situated, right? So it's coming from a particular place. And that's why I also selected one of the images, which is about the subjects. I didn't necessarily answer the question, which I think was, who is the city made for? But I think it was more about looking at designers and the situated knowledge and how it's produced. So in this picture, for example, I worked with these guys in Chennai in India, and half of them have been trained at the TU Delft. The other half is Wageningen and Yale University. And that shows a particular kind of knowledge, and they are standing in a slum in Chennai trying to find, to apply their expertise to find solutions for that area in a couple of hours, that they actually have funds available to learn the complexity. And these are pretty nice guys. They're very interested in doing good work, but the assignments that they are set out to do are actually very limiting in the capacity of actually doing a more in-depth. Yeah.
And they're all male, and they're all white, and they're all aged.
Thank you for saying that. I didn't want to be the one, but yeah, for sure, that gives it another level of a complexity. But like I said, so these are also representing Deltares, Arcadis, and other architecture firms. And the reason why they're there is also because of the way in which international collaboration is shaped, and the kind of roots of knowledge sharing are created also by these structures. So it's not that they are kind of the authority in design, but it's really about how the funding actually gets them there, and that comes with a particular skin color and a nationality, and institutions that they are trained from.
Okay, I would like to ask the other panelists, because there are 2 points being made. Actually, one is about methods, and if we are teaching the right methods to our students, and the other is that it's an appeal for an awareness of the political structures that you are actually a part of, sometimes even unknowingly, right? So I'm interested in if other panelists have an idea of how we can be more sharp, or how we can be more precise in the methods that we offer our students. So Tess said, well, let students learn. Part of it is also that students learn from each other, right? We should embrace the diversity of the student population that we have here. Is that enough, or do you feel that there are other things that we should teach our students? This is also a question for the audience, maybe. Mike?
If I can say something about it, because I think it's a very relevant question, and I think it has two sides to it, because there's, on the one hand, I think there's the question on what urbanists or people that are trained in this faculty can contribute to the whole set of skills that professionals have, right, and the team that you work with. So maybe it's not per se the individual skills of these people, but it's also the composition of the team that could be a problem. So I think it's important to realize like what you have, like the skills that you have, the skills that we learn, the very basic urban analysis, the way that we look at cities, etc. But of course, it's never enough. So it's always good to keep on to remain critical, and also to continue learning, to continue developing yourself, to continue looking for new skills that you can include. But of course, what you can do in an educational system has its limits as well, right? Mm-hmm. So I always find it a bit of a difficult question, but I think there should be a certain base that is based in Europe, that is based in being part of Delft University, which you should also be proud of in a way, and that you should embrace. But in addition to that, there's I think this whole range of skills that maybe should be offered to students, or at least that students should be able to get acquainted to, mm-hmm. that you can pick from. And not everybody has to have the same skills. Everybody can develop them in a different way, the one that fits your personal interest or what you're angry about.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's key. I don't think we should try to kind of throw away what we have and
all right.
Come too blurry.
You are a director of a school yourself, the independent school for the city in Rotterdam, where you take Rotterdam always as a case, right? And can you say a bit about the didactics that you use there, and how because I'm sure that you also confront the students with the same questions.
Yeah. Well, so the independent school for the city, we always say it's a school for people that already went to school. So it's really focused on professionals, people that have an education, people that have their background in Delft already, that have their background in other disciplines as well. So we try to bring together all urban disciplines, sociologists, architects, historians, urbanists, etc. And together kind of look at the bigger questions that we face: climate change, social inequality, all the bigger questions. And I think the nice thing of what we're aiming to do in the school is that is exactly what I was just saying, is that everybody has their skill set based on their education, but by coming together, by talking about each other's skills, by looking at each other's ways of looking at the city, each other's observations, you broaden your scope. You continue to develop yourself, and you kind of try to stretch the borders of what you as a professional can do.
Yeah,
that's a bit the aim. And for us, it's extremely important to always do that from your personal position. So we challenge people like, okay, in your work, maybe with your clients and your colleagues, you're being forced to go into a certain direction. But what do you think? What is your perspective? How do you personally and professionally want to engage with this question? And what do you need for that?
Yeah.
So that's a bit the angle that we're trying to take at Independent School for the City.
Yeah. Is that very different, because you were also a teacher here? Is it very different from? Do you use completely different techniques?
No. It's yes, because it's not a design education. So I also learned a lot from my colleagues who are architectural historians or working with sociologists, for example. It's really a different way of looking at the city. I think in the end, being trained as an urban designer, we're not really being trained in understanding who we are actually designing for, right? We do a spatial analysis, etc., but we we barely talk with people, or we barely observe for 3 days in the street, what sociologists do, for example. So I do think there's additional methods to be incorporated in your skill set.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. Raquel, I think you had a question at some point?
Yeah, I think that I thought of something while you were speaking, that I think an important skill is to self-reflect, and I think you touched upon that. So it's really about thinking about your own positionality along the process. So not only kind of skills of reading what is out there, but also kind of going back in and checking with yourself. Is it possible that I read everything, because you also have your own limitations?
Yeah.
Yeah.
People move from project to project to project and barely take time to actually think, look back and even look at the results of their project. You know, like, can you learn from them? What is, like, so moments of reflection, I think, are crucial in your working life to build them in. Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot. Caroline, you had a question for Mike regarding didactics.
Yeah, but I think it was already sort of answered, but I want to comment maybe if that.
Yes, please.
Because for a couple of times now already, it's been kind of stressed at who are we working for, designing for, and when asking to reflect on that second question of subjects I had a bit of an issue of designing for, as if indeed we know by looking at things or by walking through a neighborhood, we know what people need. And I think we need to approach that differently. And maybe I can illustrate with the image that, if that's okay.
This one?
Yes.
Yes.
So it's a drawing from a former student of mine at KU Leuven, Ruben Dont. And the title of I just want to make sure that I give it the right title. It's The Burden of an Architect with a question mark. And if you look at the image, it sort of shows as if the architect is there over the city and shaping things. But actually, if you look closer, you see that he's being directed by these small people at the bottom, and he's more like a puppet himself. So I think it's a good reminder that we are not these kind of autonomous designers doing things, creating things, but there's a lot of other stakeholders, people, other needs that are influencing that. It also links very well with the work of and now the name escapes me, the Jeremy Till, who wrote Architecture Depends. So there's all these other things as well that influence architecture, but on the other hand, design really impacts the possibilities of people, so we need to try to think of or better understand what are these other needs and look from an intersectional perspective. And I think it's not enough to just walk and observe, but we need to try to do more. And I'm not saying it's easy. It's easy to say that, but of course it's not that easy to do it in reality. But that is something I think is missing in architectural and design education, really understanding the impact and the fact that design is not neutral. It is a political thing. So when we're doing this, when we're designing, we have to think about the consequences.
All right. And if you feel I think we all agree that design is a political activity, right? There are decisions being made about who gets to go where, or who gets to live where. But if you feel that we need to, you know, we need to improve the way in which we communicate this with our students, and we should equip our students also with techniques by which they can understand these structures. Mm-hmm. How do you suggest that we do that? What would we actually have to integrate in our education, or what are the methods that come with that knowledge?
Debate and discussion, and being open for, it was already mentioned, kind of different context. Look at different contexts and talk about it and try to understand from these different perspectives. I think a very but maybe I'm biased, a very nice exercise is the manifesto of the Just City that we organize through the Center of the Just City, bringing together students from all over the world. And yesterday we had an extremely interesting debate yesterday evening. Hugo was there as well. Really opening different viewpoints by listening to people who live in different realities and explain what is the impact of certain choices on daily lives, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
Okay.
I'm a bit abstract, but I think debate, discussion is really important.
All right. And this is something that we should do more of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it would be super nice.
Okay. Sophie.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting point you're making. Here at TU Delft, in our bachelors, I think we learn a lot about, a lot of our design courses kind of start with almost a clean slate. And then we start designing, which makes it possible for us to have a very open mind, of course. But I think this is also very important, and it's something I'm really struggling with. Like, I'm designing, but for who am I designing? I have no idea. But at the same time, I think always, of course, it's very important to think about that, but it also maybe limits the creativity of the students in their first year to already start thinking about those things. So I'm wondering, how can we combine the creativity of the clean slate, the white paper, and also, of course, be responsible and think about the people that we are designing for? Like, how do you combine those two, you think?
I think the imagination is super crucial. I'm not advocating for not doing this exercise of a clean slate, but what I'm saying is that we need imagination and creativity in order to tackle the challenges that we are confronted with. And you should never let yourself be limited, because sometimes unexpected solutions come from this imagination that we need. I think and again, through the manifesto exercise, Farah Miraftab, she said something really important, that today our imagination is the last kind of frontier of colonization. Our imagination is being colonized by the idea that, okay, you cannot do this, you cannot do that, you have to live within these existing situations. No, and that is really extremely dangerous, because you have to imagine an alternative, you have to imagine a better tomorrow. So it's extremely important to do that. And if that starts from small exercises with a clean slate, yes, then that is wonderful. But it also needs to be about really daring. That helps you to then critically reflect on what is it that we have today and how can we make it differently. And then you have to imagine a far future, maybe, because if you just start from what is, then real change is not possible, I think.
Okay.
But clean slate is also very difficult, right?
Yeah.
And it also gives you the, I mean, it should all come from you, that you are the God creating something new. And I think that's never the case. So in that sense, I a bit disagree with this idea that the clean slate is a good starting point. I think there's so much we have to take into account. And there's so much inspiration to be found also in what's around us. That this, it also, when you have to start with a clean slate as a student, it also maybe kills your imagination. So it's, I'm not so sure if that is the way to go, actually.
I understand. Yeah, I for sure, I'm not saying that I think that is the best option. What I'm just trying to say is the perspective of this first year student who is just 18 years old, and there's so much coming in that it can be difficult to take into account all of these things that are
possible.
existing.
But I think helping you along the way and finding out how to look at the world around you is a much easier starting point than this is the white page and handle it.
Yeah, for sure.
Sophie, maybe this is a good moment to have a look at some of your images also.
Yeah.
We had a discussion before, and you introduced the word solastalgia.
Yeah.
Right? Can you explain a bit what you mean with that?
Yeah. So there's this word called solastalgia, and it's by an environmental philosopher called Glenn Albrecht. and it basically explains the feeling of loss because of environmental change. And I took this picture with me. It's made in Toronto, in Canada, and it's of a wall painting of a river which used to be there, and now it's all asphalt and bricks, very much brown and gray. But you can tell that these people feel the loss of that green. And I think because I'm in that board of Stilos, I'm talking to a lot of students, and a lot of my friends I'm talking to about this as well, is that we all feel this feeling of nostalgia, and maybe not in our direct day-to-day routine. It's not like we're all vegetarians and things like that. I am a vegetarian, but I think when we talk about later in life, do you want to have children? Big questions like that. A lot of us are not really sure about what's going to happen in the future, and feel very insecure and sad about it. And so I think a lot of us don't have the knowledge yet, but we have a lot of the feeling about the future. And because we talk so much about what needs to happen, and it's our generation and our responsibility, and our responsibility, it feels like a big, great cloud. And that makes it very difficult to start designing and start being active. And so maybe that's what I mean with the white paper and starting to design is we have so many problems and we have so many feelings about those problems because it's our generation that we sometimes don't know where to start.
Where to start, yeah.
So that's the picture I brought.
Yeah, when we had a discussion before, I had the feeling that what you, or maybe also I'm sure many other students need, is some way out of this depression, right? And concrete starting points or concrete helps, even though they may be small, that get you ahead.
Yeah.
And maybe this is a good, also a question for some of the panelists. How can we help our students best to get out of this enormous cloud of problems that are somehow over us, and become active, and in the way gain self-assurance maybe? Do you have feelings, do you have an idea of how we could stimulate that? Okay.
I could say something. I think that, because I think that there is this catastrophic narrative, but I think that once you start to partner with those actors that are working hard on the ground to do something out of this, it really gets you like a good feeling, and I think that that's precisely also what I tried to reflect on, with the image that they already showed, is that I think that the problem that I see with urban design today, and for example in projects that are like rejuvenating the rivers, like the idea that could be an imaginary for that area, is that they are engaging the kinds of actors that actually put us in this problem in the first place. And that's where we kind of stay in a continuous cycle that doesn't lead to an outside of the cloud. But if we are able to partner with those actors that are actually not responsible for creating these problems, but are actually working hard on the ground to get us out of there and to show us an alternative, then I think you can really get an optimistic feeling. And I selected this picture. It is in a city of Cartagena in Colombia. And this local community is restoring a mangrove area in a slum area. So it's a big slum set that, the community is mainly migrants from Venezuela, and also internal displaced people from inside Colombia that had to flee their land because of armed conflict. And they went to Cartagena and try a new life, and they successfully did so, but in a very ecologically sensitive area. which they suffer the risk of being displaced because of exactly rejuvenation and kind of more greenery imaginaries for that region. But at the same time, they're really trying to restore that habitat, showing, hey, we can also care for this environment, and we can also show you that, you know, we can create a healthy environment around us, and they're working hard to do that. And all of the rubbish comes from all parts of the city and kind of downstream to that area, and they're still cleaning it and rejuvenating. So I think if you kind of partner with these initiatives in your in creating imaginaries together with these people, you can actually get a feeling of, okay, there is an alternative. But the thing is that the reality is quite also a bit challenging, because next to this man is the new special envoy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands for international water affairs. So we went together to this community through a program called Water as Leverage. That is a development cooperation program from the Netherlands. But the problem is we already go there knowing that the types of projects that these design visions is going to be able to attract will not help this community, because they need to fit within a certain financial, bankable kind of category that makes most of the time projects be targeted not to those that most need, but actually more like linked to real estate development in richer areas of the city. But I would say that this is something that can actually bring hope if you are able to politically partner with these kinds of alternative acts.
With us now is also Paul Vermeulen. Paul, welcome. Great that you can make it. You had a problem with the transportation. The discussion so far has been about, for instance, that we need to be more aware of the political environment that we are in, as architects, as urban designers, as designers. And the question is, how can we first of all, there was a question, how can we make our students more aware of the political environment or the political system that they are functioning in? But then also, and this was Sophie's question, how can we mobilize or actually become active when we are talking about such complex systems and such immense problems that we all have no real answer to. And maybe this is a good moment for you to jump in, because as a professor of architecture and architectural design, I'm sure you have an idea of how we can help our students to actually become to have an agency.
Okay. First, I want to apologize for being this late. So my unwavering belief in timetables got severely shocked today. So the first thing I heard was, how can you all help me out of a depression? I nearly escaped one. So, well, let's see. Maybe I can immediately relate to what Rekel was showing, because, well, since you address me as a professional architect, designer, I must say that I usually don't have the comfort or the luxury of choosing with whom I will work. So I am given some sort of problem or a site or a location, and I have to find out. But, well, the first realization is a sort of modesty. So I cannot solve everything around. So that is why I, in a long career, became a strong anti-utopianist, I must say, and a serious reformist. So I think I cannot promise to solve everything that is rotten in this world, or in this particular place that I'm assigned to, but I can make, by studying them, think of a few things that could be better. And I think that is political. I think that is a political role. So I have So, and that is sometimes maybe scaring, but also exhilarating to realize that as a designer, you have a political role. So it is up to you, since you are the one who is bringing everything together, it is up to you to outline what is the common interest in a particular place, which is a political choice. And so you could meet with opposition. So maybe not everybody is going to agree with what you are fostering as the common interest, but you can at least try to make a stance and to take a position that could be seen as a fair one. And therefore, of course, I have been in situations. I would say that would be then the more comfortable situations where you can easily locate the people that you are working for and in whose interest that you are acting. So in other places, I don't know who am I working for. There's no one there, but there's a city around it. So then I have to ask myself, what can I hear? So there was talk of unheard voices, so you have to listen carefully. So, and there are always loud voices, also in terms of participation. So I think it's an often recorded problem that participation meetings will gather loud voices, people who speak easily, who have who are maybe trained, who are well educated, and who will come up with strength for their own viewpoints or for their own interests. So what then is your task as a political actor, as a designer, I think is to try to find, to localize the interests at hand, at stake. So it's up to you to find out, I think, what other interests there are, and if someone speaks, who he is representing, and if there are others that maybe are not represented. And of course, the very best thing would be to have all those who are not represented, to bring them in the room and ask them to speak out. In a pragmatic sense, very often, it's not going to happen. You simply don't know them or you cannot reach them. So then, I think you have to be an empathic enough person to realize who is missing and to realize what other interests than the ones that you can clearly hear are also at stake.
Paul, to the right are the images that you have selected.
Yes.
Could you use one of these images to clarify your point or to illustrate your point?
Well, I will take the middle one.
Yeah.
Well, because it is empty, and you cannot easily see what it is about and what is going to happen there. It's a site in Brussels, in Schaerbeek. It's called the Frisch Josaphat, which is near to the lovely park of Josaphat. So there's a train going through it, and it used to be a railway yard. So it's the site where this year, with the Urban Architecture Studio, we are working on. And I just suggest to take this picture now because, well, who is the stakeholder here? Who is that? Who is in whose interest can we work here? Because the railway yard has been there for a very long time, has been demolished for also a number of decades. And then nature took over, and all of a sudden it is realized that this has become a very valuable biotopic.
Biotope.
A biotope, exactly. So then the question that we ask our students is, who are the actors? Whose interest is at stake here? And so well, there are more lovely pictures of this site, but I chose one that could give hints of who that might be. So it could be in the right corner below. It's a little settlement where a theater company has taken foot, and also a small crowd of activists. So they could be possible actors. But it could also be in the left corner. It could also be the garden city that is next to it, where, well, a number of simple people is living there with their backs towards the site, and they hardly realize that it is over there. Or it could be in the middle. It could be the commuters using the train. There's also a train station with a few platforms in the site. They could also be challenged by the site. Or it could be the people on the other side of the railway tracks that use these industrial buildings over there, who have a job there, who come there every day to do whatever sort of work they are doing there. They could also be stakeholders, subjects, actors. It could be the sporters in the upper right corner, and it could be the larger city around, that is in the back, that you can see in the back. So all these people could be involved, and then in the middle, the ones that are too tiny to locate in the photograph could be the dragonflies, the bees, that seem to be there in vast quantities and with a great degree of variation. Those ones as well. And that is, I think, because it is unclear whose interest is at stake here, that this is a political site. So everyone in Brussels knows about it, because there's a fight between having more social housing on exactly this spot, which is something of a fair assessment, because there is a severe lack of affordable housing in Brussels. So you could maybe sympathize with it. But then there are other parties, the activists namely, and others as well, who would then claim, yeah, but we are in lack of nature in this city. The city is over-densified. Many buildings are empty. So why would we have to add more buildings if there are others that we could revalue, and then maybe use this as a sort of nature reserve, maybe in the middle of the city?
Yeah. And you even mentioned also the animals at the site.
Definitely.
Are in a way a stakeholder, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
They definitely are, and that is maybe.
But Paul, how can you? Sorry to interrupt you, but how can? So this is the site for your students.
Yeah.
How do you suggest that they actually then work with not knowing all of these things?
Well.
Or how would you, as a professional designer?
Well, as a professor, we always choose sites where we don't know what to do with. So we want the students to find out. But the first thing we ask them is to learn this place to know profoundly. So, and that is, well, in something more of a week, we will have in the room under your seats over there, in the room K. There will be an exhibition where they will show their findings. So some of them will talk with the commuters, others with a productive city on the other side of the rails, with the garden city and so on. And also some will speak on behalf of the nature.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is why I also called it political, because these animals are not going to speak for themselves.
Yeah.
So you need spokesman for them.
All right. I think Sophie wants to add to this, but I also saw a question from Mike.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Sophie. Should we
So-
go to your second image, or?
No, I just wanted to ask
Okay,
another
okay.
question. I think it's a very interesting point you're making, and I think this is a super good exercise for students to do. I'm wondering, how do you think we as students can take these types of exercises with us when we start working? Because a lot of the times it's all about money, right? How can we implement these types of things in our careers?
We discuss a lot in the studio. Money is maybe the least of them. So we don't want to overburden the students, but a money issue would be: is it possible not to build on it and to take instead empty office buildings that are plenty of, and transform them into housing, for instance? That could be something that you can calculate. It's not what we do. So we rather ask to take a view on a sort of assessment of what could be fair. And so, well, I think, well, we deal a lot with narratives in our profession. I think we have to speak a lot. We have to speak in public to the general public, to explain them what we are doing. So I think that is the best stress test that you can have for a design. So imagining if what you are going to say could be perceived as a fair statement, something that is more or less coinciding with the general interest, with the public interest.
Earlier tonight, Caroline stressed the importance of debate, and that we should teach our students also to debate, right?
Yes.
Do you agree with that, or is this also what you mean?
Definitely, yes. Yeah. Yes, and what I think essential in debate is that you also can put your own beliefs in question. So you don't go there as the expert who knows it all and who has a brilliant idea, but you have to accept that someone may have a valid point that challenges yours.
Is this the modesty that you spoke about?
I think so.
Earlier?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I add to the question of Sophie? Because I think it's not that negative as you look at it, that you say the reality is, the practice is only about money. And like Paul was also stating, there are so many voices collaborating in projects, and there are many voices that are activist or trying to reach something that is not about money but is about value. So I think also in practice there is the complexity is of course quite high, but there is a lot of positive energy as well. So it's not like, okay, we are now in the playground of the university where we can do what we really want to do, and when we are starting to work it is all over, then we have to just make money. It's not that bad. It's really not that bad. So also in real life and real work there is a lot of positive energy and there's a lot to be gained as well. So I think this grey cloud is not as grey as you are.
Yeah. No, that's good to know for
maybe.
sure.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to say the same, but also stressing that there's different types of designers, right? I mean, and there's also different types of design assignments, and I think that's an important thing. So I think, of course, the majority of the projects are a developer or a municipality that asks a question, and you just have to answer it in the best way possible. But the fact that there is also like the public side to design, like there's a lot of architects, urban designers that in the end work at municipalities and are actually the ones asking the questions, right?
Yeah.
And there's also, I think, a responsibility to the profession to make those questions as good as possible. I think asking the right question is maybe more difficult than giving a good answer. And I think it's also interesting, and there's also this role of the designer in which you can, with design you have the power to show what people might want, right? So it's a way to communicate possible future scenarios. And that can be used to influence your commissioner, but it can be used to have a conversation with the neighborhood. I think it's also interesting to explore the role of a designer as an activist, as for example, teaming up. I brought a picture of the Extinction Rebellion protests on the A12. I think this could also be the architect, right? And or the designer, one that tries to kind of use your skills, your background, your knowledge to make a statement. It's probably difficult to find funding for it, but at least in the Netherlands we have quite a nice funding body that also allows for good projects, good ideas that kind of fuel the thinking about what design can do. And I brought this picture also to show or to kind of illustrate, if you're thinking about who are you designing for, that it's indeed about the people that are now on Earth, it's about the future generations, right? And it's about the non-human species, so the plants and the bees and the trees. But it also shows, I mean, this protest is against the fossil subsidies, right? That like we're putting 12 billion a year, I think, in
Much more.
well, much more in fossil. Sorry,
or even more.
42. Yeah. That also shows that there's some kind of systemic change needed. And I think we as architects and as urban designers can play a role in this change, in showing like what this new world could be, how when you're taking into account different stakes, different interests, that it's not all bad, that there's also a positive kind of angle to it, that there is a way out, as long as we break with certain forces in the current system. So I don't know, like this role of the designer as an activist, I really think we should explore that further.
Mike, can I ask a question here? Because I think this is a very interesting point. The designer as an activist. It was in the fossil fuel discussion, or in, say, the whole IPCC, all of the reports, it was science that brought everybody to the table, right? It was not activism, it was the hard data of science. So I'm wondering if it's not, if you say we as designers should be more of an activist, I'm wondering if you could not also say, as designers, we should be more scientific, or we should take our role here as scientists more serious, because that is one way of getting people, you know, creating an awareness.
But I think it's, well, I think it's both. I think we have to team up also with scientists that go beyond our expertise. But I think our power is to bring things together and to visualize and to make it spatial, right? So we should also contribute in the way that kind of we can contribute, and not trying to do something that maybe someone else can do better. For example, we're working now with Extinction Rebellion. They're starting this project on the future of the harbor in Rotterdam, and that's really a spatial question as well, right? And they've gathered a lot of people that are good at understanding ownership, understanding the systems of the harbor, like how does it really function in a global perspective. But there's no one that knows about the physical conditions in their team, like about like what it spatially actually means to transform this area and what could be possible there and not. So, as with the Independent School for the City, we're now starting this project with Extinction Rebellion to see, like, can we also in that way visualize and kind of bring together different disciplines in this thinking from a more spatial point of view on this question.
All right.
In that sense, we have one of the best professions ever to solve these problems, and because we're looking at the future all the time, that's part of our job. So I think, here we are. We are the part of the people who are going to solve it.
Caroline, you had a question also? Or you a remark?
I just wanted to add, because indeed the science is important, but it doesn't sort of take away from the fact that you also take a position, and it's not a neutral one. You can't hide yourself behind the science and the data. You also take, when you have the data, you make a choice. So, and it's important, and I think it's fine, but it needs to be explicit. The fact that you work with Extinction Rebellion says something. It's not neutral.
No.
Even if you have the science
Super
of
nice,
whatever
yeah.
behind it, which is perfectly okay.
All right. Okay. At this point, I think it's so we spoke about designing and how, and the question is how can we mobilize our forces, knowing that there are urgent societal problems that we are facing. I would like to also look into science a bit more. What are the questions that we should ask ourselves as scientists, or that we should working with? But at this point, I think maybe also it's good to give the audience an opportunity to ask questions if there is a need for clarification, or if you want to make a remark. Otherwise, we will just continue. Everything clear, Alex? There's a mic. Wait a minute. Just a second for the people at home.
Thank you. On the notion of science and design and problem solving, because I heard a lot of time that we are gonna problem solving. If we are coming strictly from a scientific way of looking at the complex questions that we are looking at and systems analysis, then we never talk about problem solving, but we're talking about developing responses towards. And I think that is something that leads then also to a different way of designing and of co-creation, of thinking. So therefore, for me, that's something that science, that we can learn from science, that dealing with the complex. The complex fix that we are not losing for what's the solution.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions from the audience or remarks?
Maybe I can also add.
Raquel?
I think that another thing that is important for us to think is that we're in a very particular moment where science is kind of losing credibility, and we have politically a very complex problem that, let's say, our voters, who are kind of putting decision makers in the position to take decisions about these things like the fossil fuel subsidy and other things, and climate adaptation or other measures, are also not convinced by science that there is actually an urgency of the problem. So in that sense, I think activism and design as politics can even be more powerful than design as this kind of, neutral universal science. So really thinking of what it means to be scientific and political.
Should there be a TU Delft flag at the A12? Scientist rebellion, right? There are scientists who argue
Yes.
we need to be the ones out on the street.
And this is a discussion that we had with also with Els the other day, that it's not always allowed, right? Or that it's not always a possibility that you as a scientist take such a public stance that it can also complicate your position as a scientist. So that's also something we need to change culturally as a society, I think.
How do you suggest that when you say we are losing ground as scientists, facts do not have the same moral weight anymore as they used to have. So how do you suggest that we can, that as scientists we should act on that?
Of politically organizing to fight fascism, for example, or to fight extreme right movements, and to motivate students to also kind of, not be hopeless, but to really see that, the struggle didn't start now, not that we know that climate change is happening. We had other struggles in the past. We had to deal with different pandemics when we started to urbanize, and we had to deal with different challenges. And I think that, different generations were also at some moments in history quite negative and pessimistic, and I don't think that is different now. We just need to kind of keep the energy up so that we keep on fighting.
Then there's also this challenge, I guess, for scientists to build up different coalitions or to find different parties to work with. I think like old school scientists is like advising, being in your own scientific bubble, maybe advising the government if you're lucky, and they will look at the statistics and do something with it. I think we will have to build coalitions, right? Go out there, find people that you kind of, that you can put your science to work or your findings to work.
Exactly.
And that's tricky and that's difficult. And that I can imagine that an organization, for an organization as the TU Delft, it's a difficult transition to do, but I think it's an obligation that we have.
Yeah.
And how do you think our university should educate students to become people like that?
Well, first of all, I think it's crucial to continuously, in every project, that the first question is like, what do you think about this? What is your position? I think that's super crucial. And then it can be whatever it is, as long as you can make it clear and argument what it is. And I think that's a skill that you will have to use for your commissioners against your colleagues, or with your colleagues against your boss, or whatever. Like, I think there should be much more emphasis on your personal responsibility towards, the big questions that we're facing. Otherwise, I mean, it's easy to hide behind institutions. It's easy to hide behind current stakes that are there. I think we have to, I think we at least have to try to break them and speak out. Yeah. And that should start in university. Yeah.
And stay in conversation, I think.
Yeah, and stay
being able to listen, to hear other voices, and to understand why they have this other opinion, where it comes from. The moment when it's like, this is good and this is bad, then you have a problem, because then you won't be able to get forward. But I think being able to listen to other voices and to understand, and then maybe find ways to talk to each other and to find connection points. I think that's very important.
Yeah.
Maybe I can also talk from my personal experience. I'm from Brazil, and I studied my bachelor's in a public university. And public universities in Latin America, for those that don't know, are extremely politicized. And so we would sometimes spend a weekend camped in the campus having political training, for example. And there was actually student collective movements, and we would strike within the university. So I also feel a completely different energy, maybe because of institutionally how things are organized differently in a setting like the TU Delft as compared to a public institution in Latin America, for example. Yeah. But I think that for myself, these kind of political trainings that happen in parallel to formal education really helped me to position myself and understand what kind of things I wanted to partner with. Yeah.
I don't think as an institution we have an active policy to not have critical students, but we do find that my experience is, or my impression is, that our students or our community is very difficult to mobilize politically. So there was an attempt to organize. There was a climate action group also in our faculty. I don't know if you noticed, there was you could sign up a petition. It had some response, but it wasn't like the whole faculty was burning, or that our students were all that they were blocking the entrances or something. There was a sorry, yeah. Okay, there was an exhibition here that was on inclusivity, where there was also a question for a response from our community. How can we be a more inclusive community? Almost no reaction. So how can we then, if we all agree that we should be more politically active, that we should take a position, And we work in an environment where we notice that this is not very easy, not an easy thing to do. How do you suggest that we actually mobilize our students?
Maybe a small jump here, just adding something. I'm also from Brazil. There was an occupation here at the faculty, a very short one. I followed briefly the action of the climate action group here. Indeed, it's something that still needs to be structured, but the letter there had quite a few responses and it was paid forward, so it reached, let's say, other instances. And I think there's a bit of a situation here. There was an open event last semester, a deliberation on behalf of the university board of the collaboration between TU Delft and fossil fuel companies. Understanding that these companies for much of our research funding. And I think this puts us in a tricky position. As a knowledge production facility, I understand that there is, as you said, a personal commitment to not accept or not contempt the world as it is. But I think that institutionally this matters, that you're still writing from, researching within, speaking from a university which still has very close ties with the industry. So I was curious, you mentioned this project together with Extinction Rebellion about the port. How does it work with the independent school? Is it a collaboration? If you could maybe just, even later we can.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so this project is still, we're trying to set it up. So it's not there yet, and it's quite unclear what it's going to be. But I'm excited about it. That's just. But the Independent School for the City is a non-profit organization, and it runs on subsidies that we apply for and on gifts from architecture firms. And we have, there's this philanthropic organization in Rotterdam, it's called Droom en Daad, which actually earns most of its money, I think, from the fossil industry.
Yes, and doesn't pay taxes.
Yeah, and they do fund the school. I think it's only 1 more year, but it has never been, content-wise, they've never interfered with anything. So there's all this, and all their NGOs are in between. Not saying it's like there's something difficult about it, but we needed the money. And it didn't influence the content of what we did.
Yeah, I'm not saying there is influence on the content here, but I'm just saying that sometimes the people who are willing to research or engage on these research topics are not willing to do so as long as the money is coming from these sources, right? So.
No, and it is
to clarify.
And it's valid. There can be great research projects funded by companies that are maybe problematic. But I think also there, as a researcher, as an individual, as a designer, as whatever you do, I think there's still a certain trade-off that you will have to make for yourself. Like, does this work? Is it the way to go? There's some kind of obligation. You cannot just ignore the fact that money comes from there or that those stakes are at play. I don't know. Like, I think staying close to yourself is the best driver for, hopefully for change as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Before we, okay, Birgit.
Hi, I would like to pose a bit of a provocative question.
Please, by all means.
To come back to the theme of the session today, who has agency of design? Who can design? And I'd like to give just as a background in a way, in our Q1 quarter, we actually do debate with the students, and I would like to give a proposition of the students to the panel. The students claim maybe design offices shouldn't have the agency for the city scale, for example. Can we have, as private companies or private people, agency which actually has to intervene for the greater public good? Or should design lay in the future again with the municipal planning departments, planning and design departments.
Well, panel, what do you think? This touches on our relationship with practice and who has most agency, right?
I think they are right in a way. Public questions should be answered by public bodies. So the problem is that not every city in the Netherlands has a strong enough municipality to do that and to have the group of designers to work on that. So for me, as an urban design office, I think when I'm working for the municipality, I'm working for the city. So in that sense, I think I try to, like you said, listen to what's going on and to find the agency of the city, not the agency of my client. And I also do that when my client is a developer, because I want that what I make is part of the city and not part of a particular need for a specific group. So, and I think, yes, you can do that from different point of views, and you need the knowledge that you can get for that. So that could also be from a private office, but as an office, we are not making profit for profit. We're making profit to pay the salary for the people we work with and to do what we have for profit, to use that for research projects and other things to make our work better. So in that sense, it's, maybe also that's different for every office, of course, but I think the agency of the city is something important to be aware of.
Well, you are also, a partner in an architectural office. How would you respond to this question?
Exactly the same way. I think that is, so it's a matter of limited operational relevance. Who is holding the pencil? I think the relevant thing is that it's not that easy to know what the public interest is, and that therefore you need debate and you need to enter into conversation with many people. And if as many voices are heard as possible, then maybe you can see an outline of what could be a fair outcome. And then I would say then at that point professionalism comes in. And maybe I drop the professionalism. I would say the joy of making something. So that's maybe the best remedy against despair. So for me it works. Enjoying what I do as a remedy against all these horrifying perspectives that are in front of us. So, well, that is one point. And then I would also like to warn against self-congratulatory commitment. So being cozy all together on the A12. Well, it can be heartwarming, but and I would say nothing against it. And I think it's even necessary to make political statements every now and then. But in the rest of the time, we should be on the field in these offices, on all these particular locations, to try to find out what we could change. And that is why I brought this empty picture. So because I can easily have an idea of what is the problem with the poles melting down and the rainforest and so on. So I can document myself on that. But the more difficult question is what should happen there. So that is a very difficult one. So the more you narrow down the perspective, the more difficult it becomes to find out what now is exactly what has to be done. And that is what is expected from me as a designer and from all of us. So we should become good at this. And that is why we are a school and why we try to make, well, or to raise the political awareness of students, but also their joy and their capacity in making designs.
Yeah. Birgit, would your students subscribe to this conclusion, or did they have a more activist attitude? Just a second, Birgit.
It's interesting to actually reflect upon what we talk about when we say the urban, and that the urban also is a multi-scalar thing, as you actually started with. I think it's really interesting that in Tess's diagram, we see the frequencies of change in the different scales, and we see all the other scales coming back with everybody else. So I think it's interesting to actually make a redefinition of what do we design when we say the urban, and that there are different commissions, different tasks to do, and some can be a bit more from bottom up, others likely need more top down. So and I think the students address this question of how to bring these things together.
Before we slowly wrap up our session, I want to get back to the actual designing, because I have the feeling that we are talking about many things that are around designing. Can I draw the conclusion that that as far as designing and design methodology is concerned, the thinking through scales, the analysis methods that we have, we're doing fine? It's just all the other things that we need to change? Or are there consequences from what we are speaking about here that we should bring into our design studios, not in form of debate, but actual things that happen on drawing? Are we doing fine as designers? Or are there things that we also need to innovate there? Mike?
Well, there's one very concrete thing I think that is part of our profession, is that we always want to create something new. And I think one fundamental change, also if you look at climate change and all these other things that are maybe out of our control as professionals, but I think one consequence will be that we will have to work much more with what is there, and reusing material, reusing urban fabric, not changing every area and not starting with a clean slate again. And I think this is something we will have to learn to work with again. I mean, there is steps being taken with circularity, there's initiatives to never demolish anymore, or to change at least the idea from demolition and reconstruction to always starting with the existing building. It will ask a lot from us as a profession, I think.
Okay. Caroline,
yes, so the answer is no, I think. We're not good enough at it.
Sorry?
We're not good enough at this designing.
No?
I think Mike's totally right that we have to change because we have to do different things than we did before. But also I think we are very good at researching and describing the question, but making the step from there to what does it mean physically, at least for the urbanists, is very difficult. And it doesn't need to be totally new, different thing, but there is a translation from the design, from the research to the design, and I think that's something that everybody is struggling with a lot. So there's a lot to be done there to find also methods and ways of teaching to improve on that.
You're speaking about the students now, right?
Yeah, but also for us, that's one of the most difficult things. You can maybe sense what's going on in the city, but then what does it mean? How to translate it to action or to something physical? That's the key of our profession, I think.
Yeah. Caroline, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, no, just a small comment on the fact that yes, we have to work with what is, but we also sometimes really have to question what is and not. Sorry, because very typical for our profession is we make spaces, we embed things in space, and they are there to stay for a very long time. If you look at this, But that means that also injustices, they stay there for a very long time, and we cannot just hide behind the fact that now we have to be a bit more careful because of resources, and that's all true, but we still need to challenge some existing fabrics that are not working or that we need to address.
We should be bold enough to sometimes admit that we need to do away with the old
Yes.
and build something new.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, do you agree?
Yes, but actually no. I think what we should train ourselves to is to see the new in the old. So that's a point that has always been dear to me. It's slightly out of fashion, but it's the autonomy of architecture, or the autonomy of design. So you have an artifact, and well, it has been used for decades or centuries in a particular way, and I think from a creative mind you could expect to see how the same thing could be interpreted differently. So I think, well, that there are many names that could be dropped here, but I would say visiting ruins. So to stay in the time spans of the graph, visiting ruins and to see that something was left from a particular structure, and you can see it in an entirely new way because you don't walk through it in the same way as you used to, or things that used to be very important have vanished and others come to the fore. Well, that is, I think, necessary creativity that doesn't depend on having it all abolished or done away with.
Yeah.
Yes, but
which is actually no.
I think probably the way I look at the question is probably a bit different, because I look at it from the kind of the everyday experience of some people, and it kind of links to the first image that I brought, with this, which is this woman sitting on a bench, and this is the full slide. But so the picture is a picture of Ernest Cole, who kind of made images that really show the injustices of apartheid. And so this woman is sitting on a bench. I can't read from here exactly, but I think it says whites only or so, or Europeans only.
Yes.
So this is only a bench, but this kind of designing segregation went to the city scale, which is the middle image, but I'll not go into detail, to the scale of the whole country, where people have been kind of segregated based on the color of their skin. And it was embedded in space, and you had certain structures that were put there to make sure that people didn't meet each other. And it's those kind of things, those kind of infrastructures that are designed, they have been designed for that we need to dare to challenge. And this is, of course, an historical image, but if we think today at Palestine and Israel, it's still there, these issues, and that is not what we want. I don't want to design that kind of things. And if they were designed, I would like to dismantle them. So that is the kind of point that I was trying to make, that we really challenge also some structures that have been designed and take them away, and not for the sake of being careful about materials. Again, I understand, but it's about the everyday life of people.
There was a question from the room.
So I was fortunate enough to develop my graduation project together with Paul, actually, and I was sort of sensing that I think it's exactly that between the different scales. Paul, you work in architectural, artifactual scale. Like, of course, the urban fabric always plays also into the studio that you teach, but then I hear Caroline, and actually you are exactly speaking about this territorial scale, where maybe it's not so much about keeping what is, where it is a lot less materialistic when it comes to keeping something in a territory, as in, well, it is hard to really bring a, but if we talk about, yeah, South Africa, where do you want to find the romance in something that has of the scale of an entire territory and refunction that?
Yeah.
Maybe that can be done, but I find that a lot, the discussion is a completely different one than on the architectural scale.
You also brought an image on a much larger scale?
Yes, but just it also works on the smaller scale, like it's just about the impact of what we design on the everyday experience of people, and how we always design too often from our own perspective, not always understanding what it means to then live in the buildings or the neighborhoods that we design, that we think they function. That would be my kind of answer. But I can comment on that, but it's kind of a different point that I wanted to make there.
Okay. Alex. I think you just have to talk.
How it works, yeah. I wanted to come back to the discussion of keeping and circularity and not keeping. And I think we really need to pay attention that circularity is not misused for a kind of conservatism in keeping what is not good. Because the city we built is a linear one. Yeah? And we teach our students actually, but now the discussion in general, or the city we've built, or a city, is a result of a linear economy, I should say, not a linear city, well, to avoid their things. And we teach our students actually to not, when looking at circularity or regenerative development of cities, not to start looking with reuse, recycle, but rethink, refuse, regenerate. And I think that is important, to not understand circularity as keeping what didn't work.
Okay. We need to wrap up this conversation, but before we stop, I would like, in the beginning, I explained that the purpose of today is not to find answers, but to formulate questions that can be used throughout the remainder of the Urban Design Month. So I would like to ask all of you, based on what we have spoken about tonight, what would be your question that you want to pass on in the discussions that will ensue? Who would like to start? Caroline.
I'm happy to start. I think, Paul, what you said about modesty and empathy, that is so spot on. I would like the question then to be, how can we talked about methods and things that we need our students to learn, but how can we teach modesty and empathy in architectural and urban design education? Because I think that is really what we need in the practitioners tomorrow.
Okay, how can we teach empathy and modesty? Great question. Let's ask the others to think about that. Any other questions that you want to pass on?
For me, I think it's a bit about like how can we unlearn assumptions that got us in the position that we are now, and how can we unlearn through our methods and our practice.
Unlearn.
Yeah.
Yes.
And by the way, on the 20th of November, Geert and I will be discussing that during a workshop. So, if
on unlearning?
That's an invitation. Unlearning urban design.
Unlearning urban design. Okay, this is very good. Thanks a lot. Sophie, what is your question to pass on?
I think mine is pretty clear too. It's how to change this great cloud that I have, I think, and a lot of other students have, into maybe activism or hope for the future, and starting to do things instead of thinking about how bad the world is at the moment. To bring hope back.
Yeah.
Everything.
Thank you. Paul?
Okay,
This is a challenge. We didn't rehearse this before. So
my question would be, as a response to Alex, when on the flea market, am I a conservative? That would be my question.
Okay, that's a deep one. Thanks. Tess?
Yeah, I was inspired by the idea, like what methods can we find to teach design, other methods than we use nowadays. I think there's a lot to be discovered there.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Mike?
Well, yeah, maybe to add to that, I think one of the questions is how can we as designers collaborate much more with other professions? Like how can we actually work together? And we do that with certain, but I think there's a lot of professions that are still left outside of the design conversation that should be included.
Okay, thanks a lot. Well, that brings us to the end of this discussion. I don't think we have been able to find answers to the questions that we have, but it's very clear that we have an agenda, or that you have an agenda, and that I think that this agenda is partly political, and that we have to teach our students to be more politically active, and also that we find, or that we give them the tools in hand to do that. An open question is what this means actually for design. There are different ways of looking at that. I want to thank the panel very much for speaking so openly about all of this and the preparations that you have done. Thanks a lot. And I want to thank the audience for being here. Before closing, there are a few final remarks. Again, as I said in the beginning, this is the opening of a whole month of activities. So I hope that that everybody will look for themselves what they would like to participate in. But there are two things that I want to point out, especially this Thursday in the Berlage room. There is one symposium moderated by Caroline and with Stefan, I think.
Yes,
Stefan Nijhuis from Landscape Architecture, Urbanism meets BZK. Maybe you can just in one sentence tell what is the purpose of this meeting?
We are going to bring together ourselves as academics with the policymakers of BZK, more specifically Programma Mooi Nederland, to talk about what is spatial quality and why is it important if we think about the future planning in the Netherlands.
Thanks a lot. So everybody interested, please go. And the other thing is that this Friday we have another symposium, Projections, Limits and Encounters, that is also following up on the material that is visible here in the exhibition and which will be moderated by Nikos, Victor and Tanea. Not moderated, but is convened by Nikos, Victor and Tanea, and where Birgit and Tanea are, Birgit and Maurice, sorry, are also working, are guiding the discussion. Well, as a word of thanks, there are many people who were involved in all of these projects, and I list them here. I cannot name them all, but I think that we have that it was an enormous effort by many people. So thank you all who are involved in this project, and thank you all again for the interesting discussion. Okay.